Can I leave early? The millionaire's answer came with an unexpected deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us come back to our main character. She stood near the glass wall of the office, fingers clasped together, watching the late afternoon sun slide between the tall buildings outside. It was 5:45 in the evening. Her shift ended at 6. Normally, she would never ask. She never did. But today was different. Her name was Emily Carter, and she was one of the lowest-ranking employees in the entire building. No corner office, no executive badge, just a simple desk, a modest paycheck, and a constant fear of making one mistake too many. She took a quiet breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. The man behind the desk did not look up right away. Alexander Wright, the millionaire CEO, the man whose name was on the building, the company, and every contract that passed through this floor. He was reviewing numbers on his tablet, calm and unhurried, as if time bent slightly in his presence. "Yes?" he replied, finally lifting his eyes. Emily felt her throat tighten. She had rehearsed this in her head all afternoon. "Can I leave early today?" she asked. The words sounded smaller once they were out in the open. Alexander studied her face, not in the distracted way most executives looked at employees, but with focus, with attention, the kind that made her suddenly aware of her posture, her breathing, the faint crease in her sleeves. "How early?" he asked. 30 minutes, Emily said quickly. "I will make up the time tomorrow, I promise." Silence stretched between them. Outside, traffic moved like a distant river. Inside, the office felt too quiet. Most bosses would have waved her off. Some would have frowned. A few might have said no out of habit. Alexander did none of those things. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together, his expression unreadable. "I can agree to that," he said. Relief flickered in Emily's chest. "But," he continued, "only if you help me with something." The relief vanished just as quickly. Emily blinked. "Help you with what, sir?" Alexander stood, walking slowly toward the window. From this height, the city looked small, controlled, exactly how he liked his world. "I need you to attend an event with me tonight," he said, still facing away from her. "As my guest." Emily's heart skipped. "An event?" "A private business gala," he replied. "Investors, board members, people who ask too many questions." She stared at him, confused. "I do not understand. Why me?" Alexander turned back to her then, his gaze steady. "Because," he said, "I need someone who is not part of that world. Someone real." Emily felt the weight of the moment settle in. "What exactly would I be doing?" she asked carefully. "You would stand beside me," he said, "smile when required, answer when spoken to, and for one evening, you would act as my partner." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "This is not a joke, is it?" she asked. "No," Alexander said. "It is an arrangement." An arrangement. A deal. Emily thought of the reason she had asked to leave early, the unpaid bill waiting at home, the obligation she could not ignore. She swallowed. "And after tonight?" she asked. "After tonight," he said evenly, "we go back to our separate lives. No confusion, no expectations." Emily looked at the floor, then back up at him. She had asked for 30 minutes. She had not expected her life to tilt instead. And yet, standing there in the fading light of the office, Emily realized something she could not yet explain. This was not just about leaving early. This was the beginning of something she could never have planned for. Emily did not answer right away. She stood there, the hum of the building settling into the background, her mind suddenly far away from the polished office and the man waiting for her response. When she had asked to leave early, she had been thinking about one thing, and one thing only: her mother. Earlier that afternoon, her phone had buzzed silently in her pocket while she was filing reports. One short message from an unknown hospital number. "Your mother has been admitted. Please call us as soon as possible." Emily had locked herself in the restroom after reading it, gripping the sink until her knuckles turned white. Her mother never asked for help. If she was in a hospital bed, it meant it was serious, very serious. Emily worked 2 jobs, one during the day at the company, another 3 nights a week at a grocery store across town. She skipped lunches. She walked instead of taking ride shares. Every extra dollar went toward rent, utilities, and medical bills that never seemed to stop coming. Leaving 30 minutes early was not about comfort. It was about catching the last bus that would get her across the city in time to see her mother before visiting hours ended. That was the truth she had not said out loud. Alexander watched her quietly as she struggled with her thoughts. He could tell she was calculating something. Not money, time, consequences. "You do not have to answer immediately," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I do need to know soon. The event starts in 2 hours." Emily finally looked up at him. "If I say yes," she asked carefully, "does this affect my job?" "No," Alexander replied without hesitation. "Your position here remains exactly the same." "And there is no obligation after tonight?" she pressed. "None," he said. "This is not a promotion. It is not leverage. It is simply a request." Emily nodded slowly, but her chest felt tight. Requests from men like him were never simple. They carried weight, whether he intended it or not. She thought of her mother lying alone in a hospital room. She thought of the unpaid bills stacked neatly in a drawer at home. She thought of the fragile balance she lived in every single day. "I need to leave early because my mother is sick," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. She was admitted this afternoon. Alexander's expression changed, just slightly. Not pity, not discomfort, something closer to understanding. "I am sorry to hear that," he said. Emily nodded again, embarrassed by her own honesty. "If I go with you tonight, I will still need to leave by a certain time. I cannot stay late." "That will not be a problem," Alexander said. "I only need your presence at the beginning." She hesitated one last time. "This is not something I usually do," she said quietly. "I do not belong in that world." Alexander met her gaze. "That is precisely why I asked you." The room felt different now. He was no longer just the powerful executive behind a desk, and she was no longer just an employee asking for a favor. She made her decision. "All right," Emily said, "I will do it." Alexander nodded once, as if sealing a deal already agreed upon. "Good." He reached for his phone and typed a quick message. "My driver will take you home," he said. "You will have time to change. Someone will bring you what you need." "What I need?" Emily repeated, confused. "A dress," he replied, "and shoes." Her heart skipped. "I cannot afford—" "You will not be paying for anything," he said evenly. "Consider it part of the arrangement." Arrangement. The word echoed again. Emily exhaled slowly. "Okay." Alexander checked the time. "You may leave now," he said. 30 minutes early, as requested. Emily gathered her bag, her movements slightly unsteady. At the door, she paused. "Mr. Wright," she said. "Yes?" "This does not mean I owe you anything beyond tonight," she said firmly. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I would not want it any other way." As she stepped into the elevator, Emily felt a strange mix of relief and fear. She was going to see her mother. That part mattered most. But somewhere deep inside, she sensed that agreeing to this deal had set something else in motion, something neither of them fully understood yet. The ride down in the elevator was silent, but Emily's thoughts were anything but. By the time she stepped out onto the sidewalk, a black sedan was already waiting at the curb, engine running, driver standing beside the door as if this moment had been scheduled long before she had asked to leave early. She hesitated for half a second, then reminded herself why she had agreed. 30 minutes, her mother. That was all this was. The driver opened the door for her without a word. Emily slid into the back seat, clutching her bag on her lap as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. The city rushed by outside the window, familiar streets blurring into something that felt suddenly unreal. Her phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "This is the office of Mr. Wright. We will arrive at your residence in 12 minutes. Emily stared at the screen, then looked up again. 12 minutes. Everything about this was moving too fast, but there was no room left to slow it down. When the car stopped in front of her apartment building, the contrast hit her immediately. The paint on the exterior was peeling. The front steps were cracked. This was a place people passed without noticing. The driver waited as she stepped out. "I will remain here," he said politely. "Please take your time." Emily climbed the stairs two at a time. Inside her apartment, the air smelled faintly of detergent and old coffee. She dropped her bag on the chair and went straight to her bedroom, changing quickly into the simplest dress she owned. It was clean, neatly pressed, and nothing more. A knock came at the door. When she opened it, two women stood in the hallway, both professional, calm, and efficient. One carried garment bags. The other held a tablet. "Emily Carter?" one asked. "Yes," Emily replied. "We are here on behalf of Mr. Wright," the woman said. "May we come in?" Emily stepped aside, heart pounding. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur. A dress was selected, shoes placed neatly on the floor, her hair smoothed, her makeup kept minimal. No excess, no glamour forced onto her. Everything was intentional. "This is not about changing who you are," one of the women said gently. "It is about presentation." When they were finished, Emily barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Not because she looked like someone else, but because she looked like a version of herself she had never been allowed to be. Back in the car, her phone buzzed again. Alexander Wright was calling. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. "Good," he replied. "Before we arrive, we need to be clear on a few things." Her shoulders tightened. "I was hoping you would say that." "This is a temporary arrangement," Alexander said. "Tonight only. You will be introduced as my partner. Nothing more." "No physical affection," Emily said quickly. "No personal questions that cross boundaries." "Agreed," he replied. "You will not be asked to lie about who you are, only to remain vague." "And after tonight?" she asked. "After tonight this ends," he said. "No calls, no expectations, no consequences." Emily nodded, even though he could not see her. "Then I have one condition as well." Alexander paused. "I am listening." "If at any point I feel uncomfortable," she said firmly, "I leave. No explanations required." There was a brief silence. "Agreed," he said. "That is fair." The car slowed as lights from the venue came into view, bright and polished against the night sky. Emily felt her pulse quicken. "This is just an agreement," she reminded herself. "Nothing more." Alexander's voice softened slightly. "You are doing me a favor, Emily. I do not take that lightly." The car came to a stop. As the driver opened the door and the noise of the evening spilled in, Emily took one steady breath. She had asked to leave early. Instead, she was about to step into a deal that would test everything she thought she understood about power, choice, and herself. The moment Emily stepped out of the car, she understood what Alexander had meant about presentation. The building rose above them in glass and light, its entrance framed by tall doors and a steady flow of well-dressed guests. Men in tailored suits, women in elegant gowns. Laughter carried on the evening air, smooth and confident, as if everyone here knew exactly where they belonged. Emily did not. She paused for half a second, her heel hovering over the pavement, before Alexander appeared beside her. He did not touch her. He did not rush her. He simply stood there, calm and composed, as if the world always waited for him. "You are doing fine," he said quietly. She nodded, more to steady herself than to answer him. As they walked inside, conversation slowed. Heads turned. Not because of her, Emily told herself, but because of him. Alexander Wright drew attention without effort. He always had. A host greeted them by name, smiling a little too quickly. "Mr. Wright, we were not expecting you this early." "Plans changed," Alexander replied. "This is Emily." That was it. No last name, no explanation. Emily forced a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." The host nodded, already satisfied, and waved them through. Inside, the room glowed with soft lighting and polished surfaces. Crystal glasses clinked. Music hummed beneath conversation. Emily walked beside Alexander, matching his pace, conscious of every step, every breath. "Stay close," he murmured. "If someone speaks to you, answer naturally. You do not need to impress anyone." "I am not sure that is possible," Emily whispered back. The first conversation came quickly. An older couple approached, both wearing practiced smiles. "Alexander," the man said warmly, "it has been too long." "Indeed," Alexander replied. "This is Emily." "A pleasure," the woman said, studying her openly. "What do you do, my dear?" Emily felt the familiar tightening in her chest. She had prepared for this. "I work in administration," she said simply. The woman smiled, satisfied enough, and the conversation moved on. No lies, just omissions. As the evening continued, Emily noticed patterns. Who spoke first? Who listened? Who pretended not to be interested but watched closely anyway? This world ran on unspoken rules, and Alexander moved through it like someone who had written them himself. More than once, she made small mistakes. She reached for the wrong glass. She answered a question too honestly. She laughed at the wrong moment. Each time, Alexander adjusted subtly. A pause, a redirection, a shift in conversation that protected her without drawing attention to the fact that she needed protecting at all. She began to relax. At one point, a man with sharp eyes and a calculating smile leaned in closer than necessary. "And how did the two of you meet?" he asked. Emily opened her mouth, then stopped. Alexander answered smoothly. "Through work." It was technically true. Later, as they stood near the balcony doors, Emily let out a slow breath. "I think I just offended someone," she said quietly. Alexander glanced at her. "You did not." "I told him I did not care about market speculation," she admitted. A corner of his mouth lifted. "Then you told the truth." She looked at him, surprised. "You are not angry?" "No," he said. In fact, it was refreshing. For the first time that evening, Emily laughed. Not politely, not carefully, just briefly, honestly. Something shifted then. Alexander noticed it too, though he did not comment. He simply watched her for a moment longer than necessary, as if seeing her more clearly now that she was not trying so hard to belong. Time passed differently after that. The room no longer felt like an obstacle course. It felt manageable, almost familiar. When Alexander leaned slightly closer and said, "We should make one more round," Emily nodded without hesitation. She was still aware of the arrangement, still conscious of the rules they had set. But somewhere between the polite smiles and the shared glances, Emily realized something unexpected. She was no longer just playing a role, she was standing beside him by choice. And that realization, quiet and unsettling, followed her as the night continued to unfold. The real test came when Emily least expected it. They were midway through their final round when Alexander was approached by a small group near the center of the room. 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed with the quiet confidence of people who owned influence rather than displayed it. Emily felt Alexander slow his pace, just enough for her to match him. "These are members of the board," he said under his breath. "Let me do the talking." Before she could respond, one of the men stepped forward, his smile polite but sharp. "Alexander," he said, "I did not realize you would be bringing company this evening." "I decided not to attend alone," Alexander replied calmly. "This is Emily." The woman in the group tilted her head slightly, her eyes moving from Emily's face to her dress, then back again. "Interesting," she said. "We do not usually see new faces at events like this." Emily felt the familiar heat rise in her chest. She recognized the tone. Curiosity wrapped in judgment. "What line of work are you in, Emily?" the woman asked. Emily answered before she could overthink it. "I work in administration." A brief pause followed. One of the men raised his eyebrows. "Administration," he repeated. "That must be quite a change from our usual circles." Alexander did not interrupt. He did not rescue her. He simply waited. Emily met their gazes one by one. "It is," she said, "but it has taught me how to listen, how to notice details, and how to solve problems without making them louder than they need to be." The woman studied her more closely now. "That is an unusual answer." "It is an honest one," Emily replied. The man beside her chuckled softly. "Honesty is not always rewarded in this room." "Perhaps it should be," Emily said, her voice steady. Silence settled again, heavier this time. Then Alexander spoke. "That is precisely why I value her perspective." The shift was subtle, but it was there. The group's attention moved from testing her to reassessing him. The woman smiled, this time without condescension. "Well," she said, "it is refreshing to hear something unscripted." The conversation turned toward business, investments, strategy, a pending decision that had clearly been causing tension behind closed doors. Emily listened, just as she had said she would. She did not pretend to know more than she did, but when a disagreement arose between two of the men, their voices tightening as they circled the same argument, Emily spoke again. "May I ask something?" she said quietly. They all turned toward her. "If both of you are concerned about risk," she continued, "why are you debating the method instead of the outcome? It sounds like you want the same result." The men exchanged glances. "That is one way to frame it," one admitted. Alexander watched her closely now, no longer hiding his interest. Within minutes, the tension eased, the discussion shifted. A compromise formed. When the group finally moved on, Alexander exhaled slowly. "You handled that well," he said. Emily blinked. "I did not overstep?" "No," he replied. "You did exactly what was needed." She nodded, surprised by the pride she felt at his words. As they stepped away from the crowd, Emily became aware of the eyes on them again, not curious now, respectful. The arrangement had been simple, clear, temporary. But the role she had just played was not written into any agreement. And as Alexander looked at her, his expression thoughtful, Emily realized something else had changed. This was no longer just about appearances. She had passed a test she had never known she was taking, and the consequences of that success were only beginning to unfold. The noise of the gala faded as Alexander guided Emily toward a quieter corridor near the terrace. The glass doors stood slightly open, letting in a cool night breeze that carried the distant sound of traffic below. For the first time that evening, there were no eyes on them, no questions waiting to be answered. Emily rested her hands lightly on the railing, exhaling a breath she did not realize she had been holding. "I think I forgot how loud rooms like that can be," she said softly. Alexander nodded. "They are designed that way. Noise keeps people from thinking too deeply." She glanced at him, surprised. "Is that how you see it?" "It is how I survive it," he replied. They stood in silence for a moment. The city stretched out beneath them, lights blinking like a separate universe. Emily became aware of how close he was standing, not touching, not invading her space, but present in a way that felt intentional. "You did not have to step in back there," Alexander said at last. "With the board members." Emily shrugged lightly. "You did not tell me I could not." A faint smile crossed his face. "That is true." She hesitated, then added, "I am not usually brave in rooms like that. I just get tired of watching people talk in circles." Alexander studied her profile, the way she looked out at the city rather than at him. "Most people spend their entire lives trying not to be noticed. You did the opposite tonight." "I was noticed?" she asked, half joking. "Yes," he said simply. The words settled between them. Emily shifted her weight, suddenly aware of the agreement again. "The boundaries. The rules. This does not change anything," she said, more to herself than to him. "This is still just for tonight." Alexander did not answer right away. "No," he said finally. "It does not change the arrangement." She nodded, relieved and oddly disappointed at the same time. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt heavier now, charged with things neither had planned to say. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said. "You already are," Alexander replied. "Why did you really ask me to come tonight?" she asked. Not the convenient answer, the real one. Alexander leaned his forearms against the railing, mirroring her posture. When he spoke, his voice was lower, less guarded. "Because everyone in that room knows who I am before I ever speak," he said. "They already decided what I represent. Power, control, leverage." He paused. "You did not." Emily looked at him then. "I knew you were my boss." "That is different," he said. "You did not treat me like a title." She considered that. "Maybe because titles do not help pay rent," she said quietly. A brief silence followed, not uncomfortable, but honest. "My life is very controlled," Alexander said after a moment. "Every conversation, every appearance. Tonight was supposed to be simple, functional." "And instead?" Emily asked. "And instead I found myself wondering what you were thinking," he admitted. Her heart skipped, but she kept her voice steady. "You are not supposed to wonder about me." "I am aware," he said. They both smiled, the tension easing slightly. Emily glanced at her phone, checking the time. "I should leave soon," she said. "I told you I could not stay late." "I remember," Alexander replied. I will have the driver ready." She nodded, grateful he did not ask her to stay longer. As they turned back toward the doors, Emily felt a strange pull, like she was stepping away from something unfinished. This was still a deal, still temporary, still defined by rules they had agreed to. But somewhere between the boardroom test and this quiet moment above the city, the lines had shifted, and both of them felt it, even if neither was ready to say it out loud. Emily did not hear the conversation at first. She was standing near the edge of the terrace doors, waiting while Alexander stepped away to take a call. The night air felt cooler now, brushing against her arms as she replayed the evening in her mind, trying to place the unfamiliar feeling settling in her chest. That was when she heard her name. "Emily, is it?" a woman's voice said behind her. Emily turned. The woman from earlier stood a few feet away, the one with the sharp eyes and polished smile. She was holding a glass of wine, her posture relaxed in a way that suggested confidence born from long familiarity with rooms like this. "Yes," Emily replied cautiously. The woman smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "You seem out of place." "Forgive me for being direct." Emily felt her shoulders stiffen. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," the woman said lightly. "You are not usually Alexander's type." Emily frowned. "I did not realize he had one." The woman took a slow sip of her drink. "He does, and it rarely includes administrative assistants." The words landed harder than Emily expected. "I am not sure why that matters," Emily said, her voice controlled. The woman leaned in just slightly. "Because men like Alexander do not bring strangers to events like this without a reason, and that reason is never romance." Emily's stomach tightened. Before she could respond, the woman continued, her tone almost sympathetic. "You should be careful. These arrangements tend to end poorly for people who misunderstand their role." "What arrangement?" Emily asked, though part of her already knew. The woman raised an eyebrow. "You did not know?" She glanced toward the crowd, then back at Emily. "Perhaps I said too much." Emily's pulse raced. "Please," she said quietly, "if you have something to say, say it." The woman hesitated, then sighed. "Alexander has been under pressure from the board to present stability. Image matters. Appearances matter." She lowered her voice. "Sometimes that means hiring the right people. Sometimes it means borrowing them." Borrowing. Emily felt the word echo inside her. "You are saying this is a transaction," Emily said. The woman nodded. "Temporary, strategic, harmless, as long as you do not confuse it for something else." At that moment, Alexander returned. He stopped when he saw them together, his expression shifting just slightly. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Emily looked at him, searching his face for something that might undo what she had just heard. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. "Was this just about appearances?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Alexander glanced at the woman, then back at Emily. "Who told you that?" "That is not an answer," Emily said. He exhaled slowly. "This was an arrangement," he admitted. "I did not hide that from you." "Not this part," Emily replied. "Not why." Silence stretched between them, heavier than before. "So that is all I am," she said quietly. "A solution to a problem." "That is not how I see you," Alexander said firmly. "But it is how you used me," she replied. The woman stepped back, satisfied, and melted into the crowd. Emily felt her chest tighten, the warmth of the evening evaporating all at once. "I told you this did not mean I owed you anything," she said, including silence. "You are right," Alexander said, "and I should have explained more clearly." "But you did not," Emily said. "You let me walk into this thinking I was choosing freely." She took a step back, putting space between them. "I am done," she said, "with the event, with the arrangement." "Emily?" Alexander said, reaching out, then stopping himself. She shook her head. "Do not." Her voice was calm now, but her eyes burned. "I was willing to play a role," she said. "I was not willing to be one." Without waiting for his response, Emily turned and walked away, her heels echoing against the marble floor as she headed toward the exit. Behind her, the gala continued. Laughter rose. Glasses clinked. But for Emily, the night was already over, and for the first time since she had asked to leave early, she wished she had never said yes at all. Alexander did not follow Emily immediately. He stood where she had left him, the echo of her words cutting through the polished noise of the gala. Around him, conversations continued as if nothing had happened. Smiles, handshakes, deals being made in quiet corners. For the first time that night, none of it mattered. He excused himself without explanation, ignoring the curious looks as he moved through the crowd. By the time he reached the entrance, Emily was already outside, standing near the curb, her arms folded tightly around herself. "Emily," he called. She did not turn. He stopped a few steps away, careful not to crowd her. "You were right," he said, "about everything." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "That is convenient." "It is overdue," Alexander replied. "I should have been honest from the beginning, not just about the arrangement, but about why I needed it." Emily faced him then, her expression guarded. "You needed an image." "Yes," he said, "and I convinced myself that making it clear this was a deal would protect us both." He shook his head. "It did not." She said nothing. "I used structure to avoid vulnerability," he continued. "That is my pattern. Contracts, boundaries, control." He met her gaze. "Tonight you stepped into a room that was not built for you and changed it without trying. I watched you do that, and I realized something." Emily's voice was quiet. "What?" "That the deal stopped making sense the moment I started caring whether you stayed," he said. Her breath caught, but she did not soften. "I am not asking you to forgive me," Alexander said, "and I am not asking you to come back inside." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few deliberate taps, he typed a message. "There," he said. "It is done." "What did you do?" Emily asked. "I canceled the arrangement," he replied. "Publicly. The board will hear about it before morning. There will be no more explanations, no borrowed appearances." She searched his face. "Why would you do that?" "Because if you choose to walk away," he said, "I want it to be from me, not from a role I created." The night was quiet between them now, the city humming softly in the distance. "I am not offering you a new deal," Alexander said. "I am ending the old one." Emily looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "And what happens after that?" "That is up to you," he said. "If you leave, I will respect it. If you stay, it will be without conditions." She studied him for a long moment, weighing the words, the actions, the cost he had just accepted. Finally, she spoke. "I am not coming back tonight." He nodded. "I understand. But," she added, her voice steady, "I am also not walking away the way I was before." Alexander looked at her, hope and restraint battling behind his eyes. "This does not mean I trust you yet," Emily said. "It means I see that you chose differently when it mattered." She took a step back, then paused. "If there is anything real here," she said, "it starts without contracts." Alexander inclined his head. "Agreed." The driver opened the car door for her, but Emily did not rush inside. For the first time since the evening began, she felt grounded. The deal was over. What came next would not be written in advance, and for both of them, that uncertainty felt more honest than any agreement ever had. The next morning felt quieter than Emily expected. She sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand as sunlight filtered through the thin curtains. Machines hummed softly, steady and reassuring. Her mother slept, breathing evenly now, no longer in pain. That alone made everything else feel smaller. Emily had left the gala behind, but the night had not left her. Her phone vibrated gently in her pocket. A single message. "I hope your mother is doing better. There is no rush to reply." No signature, no title, just Alexander. Emily stared at the screen for a long moment before slipping the phone back into her bag. For once, she did not feel pressured to respond. That was new. That felt important. 3 days passed. When Emily returned to work, nothing had changed on the surface. Same desk, same schedule, same routine. No whispers, no looks of judgment, no sudden favors. Alexander did not summon her. He did not seek her out. And that, more than anything, told her he had meant what he said. Late in the afternoon, as she packed up her things, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Emily." She turned. Alexander stood a few feet away, not behind a desk, not surrounded by assistants, just a man in a quiet hallway. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "Outside of work, without expectations. She waited. "Would you be willing to have coffee with me?" he asked. "As yourself, and me. No deals, no conditions, no leverage." Emily studied him, searching for the man who had hidden behind contracts and control. What she saw instead was restraint and patience. "Yes," she said, "I would." They met at a small cafe 2 blocks from the office. No drivers, no reservations. Just 2 cups of coffee and an awkward first silence that slowly gave way to conversation. They talked about ordinary things, childhood memories, bad jobs, missed chances, the kind of talk that did not impress anyone but mattered anyway. Over time, something steady grew between them, not dramatic, not rushed, built on choice. Weeks later, Alexander stood in front of a room far smaller than the gala had been. Employees, friends, a few board members who listened more than they spoke now. "I want to be clear," he said. "Emily is here because she chooses to be, and because I asked, not as a CEO, but as a man." Emily stood beside him, not behind, not below. When he reached for her hand, it was not part of any agreement. It was real. Later that evening, as they walked home together, Emily smiled softly. "All this," she said, "because I asked to leave early." Alexander smiled back. The smallest requests often change the most. She squeezed his hand once. What began as a deal had ended as a choice, and that made all the difference.